My name is Sonia and I'm a Senior Cloud Advocate here in Australia. As a Microsoft employee working for Corp, but so far from the hallowed halls of our headquarters in Redmond, digital communication has always been paramount. Microsoft Teams was connecting our teams before COVID, and with the pandemic in full swing, more and more work is being done through Teams. But what has that done for our team culture? To help answer that, I'd like to introduce my guest, an ex-Microsoft MVP and an ex-Blue Badge, Paul Woods from Adopt and Embrace. Thanks for joining us, Paul.
Sonia. Hey, thanks for inviting me along. I really appreciate it.
Oh, our pleasure. Look, you are one of the known experts. You literally wrote the book on this, you and your team, and we will mention that at the end of the session. But I'm just interested in getting your perspective. We've seen such an explosive growth in Microsoft Teams usage over the past 6 or 7 months because, hello, the state of the world right now, right? So what has that meant for people who work in teams and the way that those people work together?
Yeah, look, it's a great experience we've all been through, a lived experience we've all had to experience ourselves over the last 6 to 7 months. And I think the best way to describe that experience that we've all gone through is the brute force adoption of Microsoft Teams. Now, if we think back to February or March when COVID first hit, and a lot of us in organizations, we were thinking about how do we keep our teams connected as we move to distributed work or distributed teamwork or distributed learning that's occurring all around the world today. And for a lot of us, it meant just trying to find what is the tool that's at our fingertips right now that can help us make that transition. Now, if we look at all the data from our customers, I'm sure you'd have experienced this as well, a lot of organizations made that leap using Microsoft Teams. And within weeks, we had to figure out what is the best way for our teams, and whether it's a small team that we work in, our department, our entire organization to work together. And we were basically trying to replicate what we were doing in the previous world. So we went we do team meetings today. We do stand-up meetings in the mornings. Let's try and replicate that experience as much as possible in the digital world, just so we can keep connected and have some kind of familiarity or consistency with the way that we are working. And it's been really interesting.
Paul, I think that's a very interesting distinction, because normally when we talk about technology adoption, it may be a little bit of a mingling of trying to do the same, but also changing our work habits as we adopt technology so that we work in a different and a better way using that tech. But we've had enough friction in life as it is without introducing different processes. There has really been this need to try and keep things as same as possible as much as we can, even though we need to bring this new tech stack underneath.
Yeah, spot on. And I think we made the technology transition really well, and we changed the technology stack that we worked with. We moved from physical building and physical meeting room to digital meeting rooms in Microsoft Teams. And then for a lot of us, we tried to keep the consistency in the way we work or consistency in the process along the way. Some of the other things we did early on is we thought, well, we've got this Teams thing. How do we structure Teams to work for us in the immediate short term so we can survive and keep our organization running? And a lot of us made some decisions in terms of team setup. So, for example, we have an organizational chart in our team. Let's go create our teams based on the organizational chart. And again, that was exactly the right thing to do at the time to keep us connected and keep us working together. But now we're 6 or 7 months into it, and we're starting to realize that we might have actually shot ourselves in the foot a little bit in terms of potentially creating more overwhelm, creating more work. We might be working harder, or might feel like we're working harder, feeling more mentally burned out because we've got so many of those meetings that we used to have in the previous world now happening in our digital worlds. Or we have the overwhelm that we used to have in our inbox in Outlook. That's just moved across into Teams as well, and we're not actually improving the way that we work. And I think a lot of us, if we really reflect on our own practice back in February or March, is some of us might just felt like we were faking it till we made it. Trying our best to get way through the process and learning from each other along the way and experimenting and taking the best bits of what people were doing to kind of get through those first initial months. But now I think we've got a great opportunity to reflect on what we've done over the past 6 months in terms of living this digital world of work, comparing it to how we used to do things in the physical world. And then as a lot of our organizations are coming back to the workplace or hybrid modes of work where some of us are remote and some of us are in the office, it's a great opportunity for us to think about, how do we set ourselves up for success in the future? What are the things we can do in terms of behaviors we can change that will make sure we can make this sustainable and not burn us out over the long term?
And I think that's a very good point as well, because we're now starting to realize that this COVID response and the situation we're in where we're not in our office it's not a short-term thing, right? It's not a 90 days and we're done and we're all going back to whatever normal was again. And it's a very interesting point. Jared, in his earlier session this morning on the future of work, actually talked about the human need to recharge to be able to perform effectively in the long term. So how do we make distributed work using technology like Teams actually sustainable in the longer term, now that we know that we're in for who knows how much longer of this kind of a working environment?
Well, I think the first step is to recognise exactly what you just said there, is that this is probably going to be around for a while. You look at some organisations that'll be on the call now in the United Kingdom that are now going back into lockdown, or here in Australia, in Melbourne, where organisations have had to go back into lockdown because of local constraints that are being put in place. So it's really thinking about how do we become resilient. So in case things happen in the future and we need to go back into the more distributed lockdown world, then how can we make the most of unlocking and coming back into what would be the new normal, if we use the cliches that everyone's been talking about at the moment. And I think the first thing is recognising that's something that we need to focus on and deal with proactively. I personally feel burnt out quite often. I know, Sonia, I'm sure you're in the same boat when you're in back-to-back meetings and you don't have that switching cost we used to take so much for granted previously, when you had to walk to a different meeting room or you had to get in a car and drive to a different location for a meeting. We've lost all those natural breaks that were built into our workday. So making some decisions as a group in terms of what does it mean in terms of our workday and our schedule, and what kind of barriers we're putting in place to make sure we're not overwhelming ourselves with this communication and getting caught up from meeting to meeting to meeting without having those natural breaks in between. I know some organisations here in Australia, have actually put in rules in place to have the lunch break blocked out as an example.
Wow, yeah. And look, I just want to add that it's really interesting because I think a lot of people expect that from, oh my gosh, online meetings and we're all working from home, and it's full on in terms of this is the alternative to how we used to communicate when we were in the office together, and we can't just walk together to the coffee room and carry on that conversation. The interesting thing that I found as someone who was already a remote worker, though, is just how much the volume of meetings has increased, because now everybody is used to that mode of communication. So even people who I wasn't sharing an office with now, my calendar and my meeting schedule is a lot fuller than it was previously. And I haven't changed how I work. And a lot of the people that I work with, I still would have communicated them with Teams anyway remotely. But for some reason, this volume has just gone up. And I can find myself not realizing how much time has passed and I'm still been sitting at my desk. Like I can go a couple of hours back to back with meetings or bouncing between meeting to task to meeting. And it's really surprised me how little breaks that I'm taking.
That's it. I think as a team, you need to sit down and talk about expectations. Now, if we look at some of the research we did with the Queensland University of Technology before COVID, like some of the things that we know that has an impact on employee experience and work-life borders and how people can maintain good strength between work and life, sometimes has nothing to do with technology. And like the expectations you think your manager has of you, or the expectations you think your peers have you in terms of your responsiveness and how you engage with each other, they're the things that drive behavior and can actually cause these situations where we feel like we need to be on top of things. We need to feel like we're in every meeting to appear to be responsive and things like that. And one of the key tips I'd recommend everyone think about is let's sit down as a team, let's sit down as a group and have a real conversation around how do we make this work for us. Let's not assume that we need to be on meetings all day. Let's not assume that we need to be thinking face-to-face in video calls and video conversations all day. There's lots of other tools at our fingertips right now inside of Teams that can help us take some of that overwhelm away. Some of the things we can consider is, let's try and do everything asynchronously first. So let's not set up a meeting as the first point of call to have a conversation. Let's just get a text conversation going within a channel within a team. Let's have a threaded discussion over a couple of days to get to a point where we've kind of thought about all the different options. Then get on to the meeting and have the decision-making conversation about it at the time. Don't just assume that every conversation needs to be a video call or a meeting to take place. Because what that allows each individual in the team to do is take control of their day, make it work for them, and not be dictated by whoever's organising the meetings within the team. Other things you can consider with that is, being really clear about expectations around responsiveness. So you might have a team where you have an expectation where you want to see a response within a day, but there's other teams where a response within a week is quite acceptable because of that project or the cadence that that particular initiative is going at. But we need to have these conversations and agree to these things as a group to make sure that we're all on the same page and we know that what the expectations are of others within the team that we're working with.
I'm going to take some notes on that because I think I need to email a few people and improve some of the ways we work. It's funny because we are so used to having active conversations in terms of that being how we collaborate and how we do, teamwork and group work together. So to actually question that and go, maybe asynchronous is a better mode to maybe get into some of the what's in scope, what's out of scope type stuff out of the way first before you get in that meeting call. Like I just love, like, our whole conversation Ignite has just been worth it for that one tip for me.
Oh, perfect. Excellent. Again, the organizations that were working distributed or working remote COVID, that's how they made it work beforehand, right? Distributed learning has been happening for 25 years. It didn't require video calls and meetings to actually occur. There's ways that we can use asynchronous communication and documenting our work as we go so it's discoverable and things like that. That can shortcut a lot of the things that we're using meetings for today. And I think this is one of many things we can consider with that. And another one I've seen recently is organizations or individuals in organizations setting the default meeting times within Outlook from 30 minutes back to 25 minutes or 20 minutes. But again, as a simple setting, you can change within Outlook. But again, as a group, if you're doing that for all of your meetings, you're automatically building in that 10-minute or that 5-minute break in between what feels like those back-to-back-to-back conversations that you're always running between. We don't run anymore. We click a couple of clicks to get to. It gives us that natural breathing space within the day so we don't feel as overwhelmed. And one other thing with that is just making sure that we're actually stopping work and actively stopping work. And one of the things that I think is really important here is thinking about notifications and that mobile phone that's in your pocket that is always consistently drawing you back into work when you're finished for the day at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the evening. So making sure you're using things like quiet hours within Microsoft Teams to turn off the notifications or remove that distraction from you when you're trying to catch up on a Netflix show or spend time with your family over dinner or have a weekend away. And recognizing that people may absolutely be working at those times because it works for them now because of all the different personal and professional constraints that are happening because of the environment we're working in at the moment. But it doesn't mean that you need to be dragged into the conversation because they're working at that particular time. So being in control of those notifications is really important as well.
And that's a very valid point too. It's not necessarily about not working outside of the 9 to 5. It's about working when it suits you because you're dealing with everything else right now, but not being at the beck and call of those notifications when it's not convenient for you, just knowing that you can catch up later. And because you've already set that expectation with your team that you don't need to be immediately responsive during those times as well. That's great. So if we've got to that point where sort of the culture of the team and the communication, the collaboration is working well, what's next? Where do we go from there?
Oh, look, I think there's so many opportunities with Teams as a platform to integrate your business processes and your work practices into those spaces that you're working in. So consider things like how we can use like the browser tab or the website tab within Microsoft Teams to bring those third-party applications that you work with day to day into the space to reduce the switching costs between your collaboration space and the systems of record you need to work with every day. Or other great things like Project Oakdale and some of the announcements around Power Platform. So having experiences built in Power Apps, automations with Power Automate, and then Power BI to allow you to make really informed decisions and get insights out of the data related to business processes, all within the Teams environment. It creates this really compelling way where you can kind of focus your attention on a task at hand or the work at hand within a team. And then when you need to get out of that, you can just minimize that team and move on to that other thing or get away from work when you need to.
That's an important differentiator as well. And I don't think people that are used to chat and meetings are used to actually seeing this as a platform to pull in all those other application signals in. Do you have any quick examples without naming names of maybe some industries or some workplace situations where you've seen that kind of application integration work really well?
I think in the areas that we focus on, healthcare in particular, So, how do you integrate into systems of record, like patient management system as an example, in retail, in product catalogs, and being able to look at information out of those and bring them into the spaces you're working in. In government, there's lots of data sources around government and processes within government where you can very quickly, kick off a process or watch a process or see the process from start to finish within a Microsoft team, using all those features of the Power Platform as well. So I think, the opportunity is almost boundless in terms of what you can do there. But the key thing is making sure that we're designing teams in the right way. They're focused on solving problems where we've got clear purpose in what we're trying to achieve, and we've got the right people in the space at the first time. If we're doing that, then we're solving quite a lot of the issues with overwhelm. We're getting focused on work, and we actually deliver value to our organisation in the long term.
Absolutely. And look, this whole conversation has been valuable. So, Paul, thank you so much for joining us. If you'd like to learn more about the book that Paul and his team have written, Adopt and Embrace Microsoft Teams, check out teamsbook.info. And also, we've got a great Ask the Expert with Crestron, all about creating a resilient, inclusive, and hybrid workplace with Microsoft Teams. That discussion and our next block of digital breakouts kicks off right about now. So head over to the session scheduler for more, and I'll see you later.